Join us for an interview with Harry Cunningham, co-founder of GoodMRKT, a New York-based retail boutique that rallies together purpose-driven brands that help consumers, through the act of buying, make a positive difference in the world. Join us to see what's in store.
So GoodMRKT is a community of 60 plus purpose-driven brands, all aligned around a mission of doing good. And when we say doing good, what that means is things that are good that all of us can rally behind. So we stay away from anything that's sort of polarizing or exclusive and really focus on things that are inclusive, kind of some deeper cause related things like getting women out of the commercial sex trade or getting meals to kids or getting clean water to people that need clean water.
Okay, let's get into this. You don't have to look too deeply into the research to realize that we no longer trust institutions, be it government or large corporations, the way we used to. We become jaded. When you combine this with the transparency afforded by our ability to share the experiences we have with companies, now more than ever, the ethics or altruistic practices of business factor into where we choose to spend our money. For some time now, purpose-driven brands have been growing in popularity. As Simon Sinek famously put it, many companies know what they do and how they do it, but not often enough do they know why they do it. The why to a business, and particularly the why of its customer and societal commitment, acts as more than just a statement. Rather, it's increasingly a central feature of its competitive differentiation. In fact, one Deloitte study found that companies with clarity around their purpose reported 30% higher levels of innovation and 40% higher levels of workforce retention than their competitors. And it goes without saying that has a direct effect on the company's bottom line. Take, for instance, Unilever's experience with its 28 sustainable living brands. Research has shown that these brands delivered 75% of the company's growth and grew 69% faster on average than the rest of its businesses in the year of the study. As times have changed, consumers are now placing value on things that wouldn't have ever been considered in the past, such as where a company sources its materials from, what it's doing to reduce its ecological footprint, and other factors that pertain to humane treatment of workers, animals, and more. This week's guest, Harry Cunningham, is an advocate for these types of businesses, focusing on prevalent issues plaguing our world and well-being. His co-founding GoodMRKT aims to raise awareness and frequency of the 60-plus brands that are driven to do good for the world and for us. In this interview, Harry will discuss the influence his grandfather, who ran his own chain of dry goods stores, would have on him and his love of retail, how the idea of GoodMRKT came about, what caused him to launch during one of the worst times for retail in one of the most hyper-competitive markets in the world, New York City, and much more. Now, let's meet Harry. I'm so excited to introduce Harry Cunningham, who's co-founder of a really, really interesting retail concept based in New York City called GoodMRKT, a company that actually allows their shoppers to basically do good in the world around them with every purchase of a great product they make. So Harry, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk about all the good that we're doing. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things that struck me when I had discovered that you'd launched this venture was that I had known that you've been in the retail business an awfully long time and had worked with some phenomenal brands. And the first thing is, as somebody who loves retail, I'm just curious, what brought you into the retail world to begin with? What was the appeal?
Yeah, funny. So first I'll say, yes, I've been in a long time. I started when I was in daycare. So I was like making a little shop when I was in daycare. No, in all seriousness, funny, I come from a family of educators and you know, we can dig in a little bit more to education and storytelling later. But I come from a family of educators, except for my grandfather on my dad's side, who had a chain of dry goods stores in the southeast part of the United States in the 30s and 40s. And there was never, he closed them, ended up changing his career direction and became a farmer. But the family still this was part of our family kind of thread, if you will. And nobody much talked about it. I kind of have always had this interest in it and sort of this interest in retail as a whole. I think it comes from there, would be my best guess. I think that's kind of what drove me to retail. And I enjoy customer experience a lot. I'm super intrigued by how, consumers shop and what drives them to shop and how communities get built. So, I mean, a lot of things that kind of came together. But I'm the only crazy retailer that's left in the family. My grandfather passed away a number of years ago, and everybody else is doing other, perhaps much more safe and secure things than retail. But I like the risk that comes along with it.
Nice. So before we dive too much more into the kind of the mechanics of the business and what you've learned, et cetera, just tell us a little bit about GoodMRKT and what it stands for.
Yeah, so GoodMRKT is a community of 60 plus purpose-driven brands, all aligned around a mission of doing good. And when we say doing good, what that means is things that are good that all of us can rally behind. So we stay away from anything that's sort of polarizing or exclusive and really focus on things that are inclusive, kind of some deeper cause related things like getting women out of the commercial sex trade or getting meals to kids or getting clean water to people that need clean water. Those are some of the deeper cause related things. Some of the lighter ones that we lean into are things like organic and sustainable farming, which, I believe will become table stakes sooner than later. But everything that we do is really centered around three pillars of good people, great products, and exceptional causes. And we bring those to light in store or to life in store and on our site.
Wow. Now, looking back in your career, some of the brands that you've worked with, you're well established, obvious expert in the space. What would possibly cause you to launch a retail business, not just launch your own, but also do it in the middle of COVID? What was the driving passion there?
Yeah, interestingly enough, had it not been for COVID, we might not have ever done it. GoodMRKT is part of a family of brands, Vera Bradley, Pura Vida, and then GoodMRKT being our third brand. It really came out of another conversation. We had just gotten our stores reopened after COVID. It was, July, August of 2020. And we were spending a lot of time talking about sort of how retail was shifting and how retail was changing. And there were some things that we had learned through the course of COVID by way that we had associates that wanted to stay engaged in their community. So they started doing Facebook Lives and, FaceTimes and kind of this different selling. So we were sitting around saying, like, how is the experience going to change in the store? And the original idea was actually not GoodMRKT at all. The original idea was to do something with the two brands that we already had established and just try and change things up a bit. Fortunately, our CEO here at VRA and my good friend Rob Wallstrom said, why don't you not mess up the flagship store? And our flagship here is in Fort Wayne. We have the New York pop-up. But he said, why don't we not mess up our flagship Vera Bradley store? Why don't you just do something totally different? Still lab, still try it. And so somehow, and none of us can remember exactly who said it first, but there's a really strong foundation of philanthropic giving inside both of the other two brands, Vera Bradley and Pura Vida. And somewhere along the way, we said, well, let's just do something where we're bringing brands together that are doing good. So I had a belief then, and I maintain that belief today, that people do want in-person interaction. I think our lives have changed such that we're much more comfortable on video than we are even on phones anymore because we like seeing each other. But I believe that there was a need for people to get back to community. We were seeing people leave big urban markets, move into secondary markets, suburban markets. And I felt like it was just a great time to kind of be back on the street, if you will. And whether it's Soho that, opens onto the street, or our store in Fort Wayne that is in a lifestyle center and opens onto the street, it was almost like this resurgence of getting people back downtown that sort of made sense. And I think that the pandemic also was like, if there's ever a time to try it, now's the chance. Just give it a shot and see what happens. So, I don't think that retail ever died. I think that, this pandemic might have been a good reset for retail and shifted it. But I think that there might not have been any better time than coming out of COVID to start something.
Well, I truly hope you're right, because obviously, there was a 90-day period during the peak of COVID where they saw growth in online shopping. What analysts had predicted would be 10 years, it was achieved in 90 days. Yeah. And I guess, of course, there's going to naturally be a backlash to that. People want to get out. But there's a broader narrative, though, and this is one of the things that had introduced us to one another. A few years ago, we were in Nashville and worked on a project where we kind of explored what the future of the store was going to be about. And that broader narrative, of course, is that the main street is dead. And I remember at that time, I had done an informal survey of people, and The average, when I asked them, what is the average percentage of retail transactions that happen online, the average answer I received was 60%, whereas in fact it was only 11% in North America. So I'm curious, there is still that narrative that Main Street's dead. Why do you think that that's wrong?
I think that it's wrong for a couple of reasons. Number one is I think that there's a whole generation of people that are shopping today that never got to really experience Main Street. And I would include I have 13-year-old twins, and I'd include them in that mix. When I grew up, department stores were the thing. People wanted to be in these experiential spaces. I would argue that what we've done at Good Market is, and I don't want this to sound cocky at all, but I think what we've done is we've kind of reinvented or recreated that department store experience of old, whereby people were building these big stores with all these crazy experiences. We made it much smaller, but it's still this place to go, this centerpiece for the community. You can go and learn, you can go and meet friends. And, we're very careful about the fact that inside Good Market, we have a cafe, and that cafe has a multitude of purposes. One, obviously, of which is to quench your thirst and remedy your hunger, if you will. But it's also allowing you to create a space that you can meet somebody over coffee. And so I think that, Main Street perhaps might have shifted, but I don't think that it's dead, because I think that there's this need and this desire to kind of recreate what happened 100 years ago in a very different way. And Main Street as it was might be dead, but Main Street is alive and thriving as it is today and as it will continue to be. And I would love for somebody to prove me wrong, but I will continue to believe that, hopefully as long as I live.
Well, I mean, I certainly think that the sheer fact that the majority of transactions are still happening in physical stores is an indicator of that. But it's interesting to me, like, again, when I think about your long history in retail and about, reimagining what retail should be about rather than what it evolved to through whatever efficiencies, what did you take away from your career? What did you learn in the history of your career, both good and bad, that you're applying now in Good Market?
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to answer, actually, a lot. I think there are a lot of things that I was able to really capitalize on that, had I tried to do something like this 20 years ago, wouldn't have been a tenth as prepared. And I'm still learning every day, by the way. So it's by no means do I want to suggest that I have it all mastered. Every day I learn something new. We fail forward every day. We get better. But I think what I've been able to really think about as we started Good Market is a few things. One is the way that we curate brands is very kind of thoughtful. And in addition to checking those boxes of good people, great products, exceptional causes, it's also like there's a sense of discovery that we really think about when we think about the brands, because I know from my experience that people love exploring and discovering and finding something new and getting introduced to something different. So, the way that we do that is very different at Good Market than how we've done before. But I think that's one of them. I would give a lot of credit to my time at Saks Fifth Avenue for making me really understand and appreciate the customer experience and how customers should feel when they walk in the store. Whether it's a luxury store, it's a store on Main Street, or both, or whatever that might be. I'm very sort of sensitive to what that experience is going to feel like when somebody walks in the door. And probably our biggest vote of confidence was one of the co-founders at Vera Bradley walked into Good Market, the flagship in Fort Wayne, and she said, "I feel like the store just gave me a big hug." Like, that's perfect. Like, that really very well describes what a physical customer experience should feel like, right? So I think that's a big part of it. So the community piece, the product assortment piece, and then really the kind of the education, whether you're educating people on innovation and product qualities that are out there, or you're educating them on the founder and the purpose and the good that's happening as a result of you making your transaction. All of those things kind of come together. So sort of like I tapped into a lot of different experiences that I've had. I've been fortunate to work with some really incredibly talented people along the way. I wish that we had time that I could thank them all for what I learned from all of them. But I think really tapping into what I've done, and sometimes I don't even realize until after it happens, because it's become part of me. That experience has become part of me. I think if I know we're not necessarily in the business of giving advice, but if I'd give any advice, it's as you're getting into your career, whether you're 5 days in or 5 years in or 15 years in, take every single day as an opportunity to learn something and pocket it away. And you never know when you're going to need it again. And I've been fortunate that I've been able to do that, with some of the most incredibly talented people in the world.
Do you know, that point you made is just a brilliant one. It's amazing to me. This is the fascination I have with business. The whole point of this channel is to inspire people to get into business or to help establish businesses find a new sense of purpose. It's the thing that I always find interesting is that there's no guaranteed formula. All you can do is basically try and mitigate your risk, be so attuned to what the market needs, and then you've got to go out and let the market judge you. And you're right, like you can never stop learning, otherwise you're going to fail at some point. But I'm curious, like, this is a particular bugbear for me is when I go into stores, I'm more often disappointed by the experience I have than surprised by the positive experience I have. As somebody that's been around a while, like, what do you see happens within the mindset, particularly of larger retail organizations? What happens in the mindset that kind of erodes the kind of qualities that you're talking about embracing within your own store?
Yeah, I think that as companies get big, they start to lose sight of little details. And I really believe, and I said this for years, I really believe that the little details are what make the experience amazing, more so than the big things, right? The big things anybody can do. The little details, like at GoodMRKT, I'm again not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but when you order a drink at our cafe, we serve our drinks in a recyclable paper cup, but we put them on a coaster that's a ceramic coaster that says "You belong here." And so you get a coaster and then your cup goes on that. That's a little detail that more often than not, we see people pick up their cup and smile. And that "You belong here" tagline is something that came about as a result really of an accident. I was just talking to the person that's helped me write copy. His name's Adam Taft Lambert. And we added the Taft in, or he did, because he didn't want to be confused with the American Idol guy because he can't sing, and the American Idol guy can sing. But we were talking about, I was kind of describing my vision for GoodMRKT and what I wanted the experience to be. And I said, I really want people to feel like they belong here, whether they are coming in to shop with us or they have never been. Either way, it's sort of a double meaning. So I think, in my opinion, the things that set a great experience apart are all those little details that are so very special. I remember when I was at Saks, we used to walk the windows on Fifth Avenue. The team would set the windows. We'd walk them, look at them before we unveiled them. And I was like, perhaps it's a fault of mine or an OCD or whatever you want to call it. I would find things like a chip in the paint on the back wall, or a bank pen that had been left behind. And like those little things. And I would have people say, "Oh, nobody's going to notice that." Well, I noticed it. So if I noticed it, I'm not that unique. I'm not like some unicorn that's out looking for little things, right? Somebody's going to see it, and that's an imperfect experience. So I think it's, for me, all about the little details that make the bigger experience what it is. What's the music that's playing? What's the scent? What are the flowers? What are the plants? What is all those things. There are big things, there are small things. I just like to live by the little details.
Do you know what's amazing? There was a great quote from, at the time, the chairperson of Selfridges. And she said, "We are not merely in the business of selling stuff. We are here to create a theater of dreams." Mm-hmm. And I remember being in that store. I was working on a product display one morning before the store opened, and I witnessed this team of people, all beautifully dressed, walked out. They'd come from their morning meeting. Mm-hmm. They kind of walked out and all spread through the store, and every one of them, all they were doing was making minor adjustments to everything in their departments. They were paying so much attention to the detail, and Selfridges, and what's extraordinary about it is on either side of Selfridges are two major department store retailers, and they're both a pale comparison to Selfridges. Mm-hmm. What I always find really interesting is that the executives in both those stores can walk into Selfridges and witness this, but they still, and it's not because they're bad people or dumb, mm-hmm. It's just that they're within cultures that don't appreciate what you just described, is that there's a lot of stuff you can't measure on a spreadsheet that is often the stuff that makes ultimately the difference for the shopper. I find it really interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's important what you said, though, to not lose sight of what's on the spreadsheet. but at the same time, make sure that you're catching the things that are not on the spreadsheet. So it's really, you have to balance the two. It can't be one or the other and be successful. It really needs to be both.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. Now, one of the things that really fascinated me when I looked at GoodMRKT was that it felt to me like it was an antidote to consumer culture. And because of the way you were choosing brands and what you were allowing people to participate in through their purchases, it felt like it was a real, it was a way to counteract the effects of the labor market or in the environment. Where did that idea come from? Like, what was it that drove that?
Yeah, I think that what happened is, I believe, and my co-founder Mary Beth and I both believe, that people want to do good. And there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot of negative going on in the world, and it's heartbreaking to see. But I do think that we are at a time and a place that we can really make some impact. And I believe this not because I want to pretend that I've got the answers. I don't. I believe it because I'm actually getting to speak to customers that walk in the store and getting to interact with them and find out what's driving them. But I think what our approach was is really like, people want to do good. They want to feel good about what they're doing. They want to know that you need to buy X, Y, or Z because you need a shirt or you need glasses or whatever it is. It's much more fulfilling to know that when you do something that you have to do anyway, you're doing even more almost by default. And one of the things that we've learned, Robert, with GoodMRKT is that there are a lot of people in the world that actually want to do good, but they don't know how to. They just need some help on how do we, like, I want to help, but I don't know how to help. Whether that's they have money to give or whatever that might be. And on that note, we've certainly seen a shift, in my opinion, in how people give today. The days of old whereby organizations would just ask for money. The new generation isn't about just giving money. They want to know what their money is doing. So I think what we've been able to do is really kind of think about this culture shift that's happening, and the fact that we hear so much bad news every day, and I blame the media for that. Is like there's so many things that I don't, that we're not talking about that are good, and for us it's about like, how do we continue to like scream from the rooftops? Here's for a place where you can feel comfortable along somebody that you may have never met prior to coming in this store, because you're both in a place where you can feel good in your heart, you can feel good about your purchase, you know that you're making a difference.
I love that. That's such a great philosophy. You're so right. It's amazing to me. There are so many people that just simply don't know where to start. And it's the great thing is, as businesses, this is our opportunity to help show them the way. They want to do good. Let's help them.
Yeah, for sure.
So a lot of people, obviously, most of us who start a business are coming from being an employee of one. And I'm curious, as somebody now that I think you've been in business now just over a year, what were the big lessons that you've learned that you took away as an owner that you wouldn't have necessarily picked up on as an employee?
I think probably the one that comes most quickly to mind is there's nothing in the store that I would ask anyone to do that I either haven't done or haven't learned how to do myself. Right. And I think that includes, I can make a latte for you. I never could have made a latte for you a year and a half ago, and certainly not the good latte, our signature house drink, but now I know how to do it. Again, it goes back to that conversation about all the little fine details. I didn't want to have anybody in the store doing anything that I didn't know how to do or hadn't learned or hadn't experienced myself. I don't know that, certainly from my time in the department store world, I don't know that was always top of mind. We were creating ideas, creating space, creating concepts, but not necessarily thinking about all the ramifications that were involved. So the biggest aha for me has certainly been, if I need to go do something, I go do something, including somebody calls in sick on a Saturday. If they don't have coverage and I need to go work 6 or 8 hours on the floor, I'll do it. But I do it not just because we need coverage, but also because it gives me an opportunity to get closer to the customer, to talk to them, to interact with them. They don't know who I am they don't know that I'm the co-founder of this initiative, right? They just know that I'm there working. So it almost gives me this opportunity to, one, help the store, but two, be in the business, like really, really in the business. So I think it's, that's been a real big thing for me. Different, I would say, from like when I was creating windows on Fifth Avenue or on, in Beverly Hills or whatever it was, nobody knew who I was when I could step back and watch all that stuff. But it was a very different experience than actually getting to interact and talk and hear people's stories. And, we've launched our podcast, Good Market Live now, and we get to talk to, I've met every founder that has a product in our space, but we get to talk and share their stories. And that's something that I think has been really kind of inspiring and eye-opening for me too. So
I love that part, because to me, that's the magic of retail, is like, it's the human aspect of it. It's not the kind of machinery around the background. That's what I love about it. I was running an e-commerce business in the UK, and I would regularly go and do deliveries and rock up, and people would be, oh my God, aren't you the president? It's like, but the point was to see the look in their face and ask them how they're doing and get that feedback. I mean, it's just awesome. I love that part of it. So what?
It's like real life undercover boss, right?
Yeah, exactly right. What are the big things that were different in the execution from what you originally planned? Like, that saying that a strategy is great until you get punched in the face. Well, here's the plan, and then you're in market a year later. What were the big shifts that changed from what you'd originally thought was going to happen?
I think the biggest sort of surprise for me, or arguably maybe even shift, was originally the way that we kind of conceived the store was going to be sort of quadrants of the store. And we thought we'd get 6, 8, 10 brands in the space. And it was going to be kind of these bigger brands and less stories. Interestingly enough, through the course of working with these brands and finding brands to come into the space, we thought we'd open with 10 to 12. We opened with 34. Now we're over 60, almost 65 brands. What we found is that people want more. Like, the more we give them, the more they want. The more we teach, the more they want to learn. The more we educate and tell stories, the more they want to hear. The more causes that we're able to bring awareness to and help drive good to, the more causes there are that we need to bring awareness to. So that's been really kind of eye-opening to me, not what I expected. I knew that there were a lot of charitable organizations and a lot of people that were doing good. I had no idea the real magnitude, and I think it's much bigger than what we originally thought. The other big thing that's been kind of interesting is, as we've had to add these brands, it's forced us to change even how we merchandise the store, because we have to re-merchandise it much more frequently to add in 2 brands, 5 brands, whatever that might look like.
Right.
It's been surprising to see how people discover something new. And we're running at about probably more than 35% of our customers are not first timers. They've been in a second time. We have even some of them have been in 3, 4, 5 times. And I want to kind of clarify that by saying not just for cafe. I'm talking about, like, we do have regulars that come in just to get coffee. And so that's kind of cool that we built that community culture with coffee. But what it's allowed us to do is by being forced to change because we've added a new product, it also indirectly creates a new experience for you as a customer every time you walk through the door, because you might see something that might have been there the last 3 times you were in, but because of what your path was, or because of what you found, or because of whatever the interaction, you may not have gotten to see it. So I think those have been a couple of interesting ones. We learn every day, though, and things get upended every day, and that's part of the fun of it. When we launched with a QR code on each one of the brands. They have a sign, they have a QR code. If you remember, a year and a half ago, QR codes were bad. Right? We tried to do QR codes. I think QR codes were just one pandemic away from being relevant. And so now we're actually seeing people use that technology, which has been it's actually cool. So
it is really cool, actually. That's such a great thing you just said, that the more you teach, the more people want to learn. There's a brand that I love called Huckberry. I don't know if you know them. They've started by 2 guys, 10 grand. And I think now they recently said they've had 1 million customers.
Wow.
And what I loved is I bought an outdoor jacket. And the day after I bought the jacket, I ended up watching a 10-minute video with the person who designed the jacket that came to me, as a result of just following them online, of the brand online. And 2 minutes in, my wife said, "Wow, that sounds really interesting," and sat down. And, and what I loved is that I think that's another thing that seems to have been missed, is that people are fascinated by what we make, by what we sell, that they're open to that. In fact, that has a lot more value for them than being sold to. It's like, take us inside the stories of what I'm purchasing. I just love that. But man, it was fascinating to me. So
it's interesting you say that, Robert, because I think that those of us that have been doing this for a while, we almost, I'm running a store and building stores because it's what I do. And I forget sometimes that people haven't been exposed to that. Like, I'm always inspired and amazed by when I get to watch people do their craft, whatever that craft might be, whether it's a doctor. And I remember, my kids were born prematurely, and, I said to the doctor, what do we do? You treat them just like any other kids, which we've done. And I said, no, thank you for helping them get here. And he said, I'm just doing my job. Well, guess what? What you're doing is very different from what I'm doing, but it's always interesting to me when people get excited and I get to kind of share and hopefully inspire people to want to be retailers. I don't know if it's the greatest advice ever, but maybe it is. But it's what we do, and it's fun to get to share what we do with people that are interested in it, that want to hear it. And at the same time, we get to have that on the other end.
I think that is of central importance for a business owner. It's one of the things that I say to brand owners that I work with is you have to find a way to fall back in love with what you do.
Yeah.
Because I think if you don't love it, if you haven't fallen in love with it, then you can't see the magic that the consumer is supposed to see.
Yeah.
You need to find that. You need to push away all the operational considerations, the financial pressure, et cetera, and say, what are we fundamentally about? How do we engage people? Because this is an awesome business that we're in. I think it's really important.
There's not a day since we started the Good Market conversation that's felt like work yet.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. Do you think that retail's changed in the last 10 years?
Absolutely. The retail's changed in the last 10 minutes.
What's changed?
I think everything has changed. At the same time, everything has stayed the same. So, if you think way back, and it's funny, we were talking about Selfridges, right? And hopefully you got a chance to watch the Selfridges, mini series that was on TV. Yeah. Obviously a lot of fiction, but a lot of fact in there. Super interesting guy. All about theater, like retail theater. Well, then we moved away from that for a period of time where we got rid of display and we got rid of X, Y, and Z because we thought that consumers, shopping habits were shifting and so forth and so on. And now we're back to it. So has it changed? I think it's cyclical. I think that we're obviously integrating digital in a whole new way than we ever thought about before. Right. When I started in retail, yes, we had computers, but we weren't thinking about how a consumer was using their phone.
Right.
In the shopping experience. And now I'm actually reliant on you to bring your phone to Good Market and scan a QR code. So I think those kinds of things are shifting. But I think if we're not continuing to change, we are never going to win. And changing doesn't mean everything we're doing today is wrong. It needs to be done differently. Change means, what are we doing today that's right? What are we doing today that's wrong? And how do we need to continue to adapt both? How do we build on what we're doing that's right? How do we learn from what we did that didn't work and do it differently? So yes, retail's changing. Retail's always going to change. When it doesn't, make sure I got a nice walnut casket and it's pretty and all that stuff.
So my last question is this. You said earlier, you made this comment about not offering advice, but this is exactly what I'm going to ask you to do, is offer advice. You've not only launched during COVID, but you've launched your business in one of the most competitive retail markets in the world, New York. And I'm curious, what would be the 3 lessons that you would offer to someone who is thinking of opening a store?
Interesting. I love this question. I would start with one. If you believe it, don't give up on it. Don't let people tell you you can't do it. And I'm very much of the ilk that if somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm driven that much more to prove that I can. Not for them, because they probably don't need anything proven to them if they're telling me I can't do something, but more to me. Like, you said I can't do it, I'm going to prove to myself that I can. So I would say, 1, stick to that. Second thing I would say is, there are failures in life every day. There are things that go wrong every day, right? Don't let the things that are going wrong stop you from doing things that you believe are right. Right. And I believe there's a mental health connection there, and mental health is one of the causes that's very, very important to me. But there's a mental health connection there too that goes along with confidence. And I've been lucky in my life that I don't live with a lot of fear of failure. And I attribute all of that to my tremendous support from my parents, my grandparents, that just encourage me to keep trying things. And I hope that I'm giving some of that to my kids. But don't be don't be scared of failure. Don't let failure stop you from doing something. And the last I would leave it with is there are no crazy ideas, right? Bad ideas, I should say. As crazy as an idea may seem, there's probably something inside there that inspires something else. And I remember back to, when you're doing windows on Fifth Avenue, everybody thinks that you've got these massive budgets and you've got all this Actually, the budgets are not huge, but the talent and the creativity that comes out of the team that does them is unsurmountable. And, we used to sit and talk about ideas and brainstorm ideas for windows, and literally everybody could bring something to the table. Doesn't mean we're going to use your idea, but doesn't mean your idea isn't going to spur something else that turns out to be perfect. So I think that's probably my best advice. And I sum it all up into don't let fear run your life.
Such great advice. Thank you for that, Harry. Do you know, in that last example you used, I wrote an article about really not giving up on retail. And one of the things I said is, when we take our kids to see the Christmas windows on Fifth Avenue, we're not doing the same around the computer screen.
Yeah.
Like there's a magic in what retail is about, and it's kept alive by people like you, Harry. So I just want to say thank you so much for the time you've given us.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate having the chance to talk. I could talk for days about it, and I love when people want me to. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. It means a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Harry. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of our interview with Harry Cunningham, co-founder of GoodMRKT. I so love GoodMRKT's mission. Not only does it suggest that stores aren't dead, but more, they can embody the idea that business can be a tool not only for improving ourselves, but also improving our society and the world around us. And again, if you enjoyed this interview, please remember to hit like and subscribe for more stories of inspired entrepreneurs. We hope to see you next time.